Now, the top story, of course, is the Taliban has formed an acting government despite violent opposition from resistance fighters in a clear trademark violation of our whole thing. Clarissa, you were on the ground as Taliban forces took over Afghanistan but are now safely out of the country. What can you tell our audience about the conflict that I haven't already regurgitated on air based on what my driver told me on the car ride in?
Well, I guess what I would tell your viewers is that Afghanistan is going through a very challenging and for many people very painful period of deep fundamental change.
Been there.
And while the Taliban has tried to project an image that it has matured as a political force, it has not yet persuaded people or many people of that with its actions.
Why is the Afghan resistance continuing to fight after the American media's 2-week-long attention span has already expired?
Well, I think if you were to speak to people who've been fighting in the Panjshir Valley in the north of the country, they see this as an existential battle. And they believe fundamentally in their cause, and they're willing to fight for it regardless of whether the international media spotlight is on there or not.
Well, let me just say the National Resistance Front could garner American support by accusing the Taliban of mandating strict COVID protocols. But meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham took a break from scrolling IMDb for a list of movies where the dog dies to say this on the BBC.
We will be going back into Afghanistan as we went back into Iraq and Syria. To the
Hang
British.
on, are you
Oh,
seriously think the United States will once again, in a foreseeable future,
Yes.
put troops back into
We'll
Afghanistan?
have to. We'll have to, because the threat will be so large.
Truly off base to think America would go back to war because of a threat. We really don't need a reason. Clarissa, are calls to return ground troops to Afghanistan to fix things we got wrong the first time just another instance of America's self-sabotaging perfectionist streak?
I mean, let me just try to unpack that question. I just would say that, there are people who are fearful that Afghanistan will be used as a safe haven for terrorists and that threats could be plotted there and attacks could be launched from there. I think we're a ways away from what I've seen on the ground from talking about putting boots back on the ground. But clearly, others disagree.
Now, I'm with Lindsay on this one. Al-Qaeda is a threat to American and British troops, so we need to send more troops in there.
But Catherine, won't that increase the number of troops that Al-Qaeda can threaten?
I didn't even think about that. We should send in even more troops to protect those new troops.
Or we could get all the troops out of there so no one is threatened.
Sounds like the perfect job for 50,000 troops.
Wow, okay.
It speaks to America's terrible work-life balance that we're already thinking about returning to Afghanistan less than a week into our war vacation.
Look, we don't need to send in troops. Now that they've established a government, we can just let the CIA stage failed coup after failed coup until one finally sticks.
It's a workable solution I think we can all agree on. The Taliban's rebrand as the younger, hipper militant insurgency faced another hurdle as Afghan women rebuffed the Taliban's generous offer to get rid of their rights for them. The Taliban used force to crush a peaceful demonstration for the second time in less than a week. They began beating protesters with rifle butts and sticks, witnesses said, and the crowd scattered after the fighters began firing into the air. Wow, can you imagine living in a country where the police crack down on protests of people's fight for equal rights? Clarissa, the media class in America has now shamelessly shifted their focus from waging war in Afghanistan to saving the women and children of Afghanistan. Is there any chance we can somehow reprogram our drones to secure women's rights?
I think a lot of people, not just in the US, but around the world, are very concerned that women's rights in Afghanistan could be drastically reduced under the Taliban. But what's interesting is that whether or not the Taliban has changed, we definitely know that Afghanistan has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And women are not going to just surrender their rights freely. They, as we can see already, are willing to fight for them. And these protests are being organized on social media. This is a tech-savvy new generation that the Taliban really hasn't encountered or dealt with before.
It is unfortunate the American forces failed to quell the uptick in cable news hosts feigning long-standing concern for Afghan women and children.
During the US occupation, only about a third of Afghan women were extended more rights. So we just need to stay for 40 more years for all women to have rights.
Yep.
The Afghan protesters probably freaked out when the Taliban started firing into the air because it reminded them of all the bombs the U.S. dropped on their family family members, you know? It's probably that.
It could
Honestly,
be that.
I think the Taliban is being too flashy with their subjugation of women. You gotta do it subtly, democratically, through lower courts and state legislatures.
Oh, that food is so good in Texas. Now, as the Afghanistan war winds down, competition is heating up for Defense Department contracts to dominate the next generation of innocent civilians from the air. Among the competitors is the world's largest baby limb liberator, Lockheed Martin, who just unveiled their super secret weapons facility called Skunk Works. Equally cutely named weapons manufacturer PR mouthpiece Politico must have gotten my invite to check it out and reports Skunk Works is investing big in digital engineering and wants to one-up competitors Boeing and Northrop Grumman, all of which are jockeying for a role in the Air Force's next fighter jet program known as Next Generation Air Dominance. It's about time we brought bombing countries back into the Stone Age into the 21st century. Clarissa, what does America's future presence in Afghanistan look like? Or put another way, which weapons manufacturer should I put my money into?
The preference for the U.S. appears to be, operations that are conducted without boots on the ground. So, looking at developments on the drone program, for example, although we've seen how that can go horribly awry as well. Just before the U.S. completed its pullout, a family of 8 were actually killed in a drone attack that was targeting an ISIS car bomb. So I'm not sort of privy to what Lockheed Martin or any other of the experts are planning next, but one would assume that it will entail more stealth, fewer boots on the ground, and hopefully more precision and accuracy.
Yeah, or just get into like potato chips or something safer. But yeah, Ike, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm not sure why Lockheed opted for a ribbon-cutting ceremony when a precision drone strike on the ribbon would have been way, way cooler.
It's true. Honestly, it's sad seeing these arms dealers so desperate for the Defense Department's attention. Just be yourself, and when the right war comes along, you'll know.
That's nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everyone. I'm still waiting on an email from Lockheed Martin about what my opinion is.
Well, let us know and you get it.